Good morning, Cecil.
Oh, good seat for my. Good morning. I'm always in the background. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay. So it is now 9 o'clock, and I will call this of the study session of the Campbell City Council to order. This meeting is being conducted consistent with the, where am I reading here? In order to protect constituent city officials and city staff, the city requests all members of the public follow the guidance of the California Department of Health Services and the County of Santa Clara Health Office's order to help control the spread of COVID-19. The study session meeting will be conducted via telecommunications and is compliant with provisions of the Brown Act and Executive Order N29-20 issued by the governor. The following council members of the City of Campbell City Council are listed to permit them to appear electronically and telephonically at the special city council meeting on March 31, 2021. Councilmember Ivy, Councilwoman Susan Landry, Councilmember Sergio Lopez, Vice Mayor Paul Resnikoff, and Mayor Liz Gibbons. The public will not be able to attend the meeting in the council chamber physically. The city council meeting will be live streamed on channel 26, the city's website, and YouTube, which is typical HTTPS www.youtube.com/user/City of Campbell. Those members of the public wishing to participate are asked to register in advance. And public comment for the city council meeting will be accepted via email prior to this meeting. And let's see, I will say that. And okay, so we will call to order. And I just want to make an announcement as we call the meeting to order. Because this is a study session, it's a little different than a regular meeting. We will take all public comment at the beginning of the meeting, not during the discussion. We don't have a question and answer and then a public comment and then discussion at council. As a study session, we take all input at the beginning of the meeting. So hopefully that won't confuse people. So may we have a call to order, please?
Councilmember Ivy. Present. Councilmember Landry.
Present.
Councilmember Lopez.
Present.
Vice Mayor Resnikoff.
Here.
Mayor Gibbons.
Here. Thank you. Okay. And do we have any public comment at this time?
We do have a few public speakers. Looks like Virginia Cortez.
Okay, Virginia, would you join the conversation? Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Virginia. Thank you.
No, I just was disappointed to see the Bearcat was still in the budget, and I think it would rarely be used. So that was just my comment.
Thank you. That will be discussed as part of our CIP review discussion, probably towards the end of the meeting. We'll see how the conversation goes. Thank you very much. And do we have another?
We do not have anyone else that wishes to speak.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will bring it back to the council and staff, and the city manager and I are going to kind of do an introduction here. Brian, you're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thank you for your time. I know it's important, so we're going to try to be efficient today. And we've organized the discussion to get through a lot of material. I know we've provided a lot of material in the packet, both to the public and the council. And we've structured the day working with the mayor to try to get through this in a structured format. We're going to start by kind of talking about big picture and what it is that we're trying to achieve today. And that is really providing early input on everything that we're going to discuss today, from budget, from programs. We're going to talk about revenue sources. We're going to talk about programs and future budgeting items. We're going to talk about the commissions and their work plans as it affects staffing in our work plans. We're going to talk about the CIP and projects in the CIP moving forward, and priorities moving forward. And we're going to talk about forecasting and looking out into the future. So hopefully today we've organized this to go through that. Appreciate your patience. We didn't provide a lot of answers in the packet. What we've provided you is kind of status quo of where we are. The intent today, as I mentioned, was to get council's early input on these items before staff puts pen to paper and we draft preliminary budgets. What you see today is a snapshot of where we are today. Obviously, as we prepared the 7-year forecast, there is some assumptions in those forecasts. We will discuss what those are and what may fluctuate over time in those forecasts. And really what we want to do is get council direction as we prepare for April 20th, and then for the release of a draft operating budget on April 30th. Direction from the council before we make assumptions and before we put pen to paper. Today was really a day to brainstorm through these topics in a structured way and get your early input. We're not asking for formal direction from the council today on any of these items. There's no legal actions that the council's taking, but we do hope that there'll be some consensus on direction. So where there's disagreement, we may talk a little bit about trying to, whether we build consensus or not as we develop the budget. That would be important to us. And then recognizing areas where there is no consensus as we move forward, and we talk about the budget at future meetings. Even where there is no consensus, we'll know where the hot topics are for council members, and we'll know to be able to address those or have conversation about those in upcoming budgets. So that was my introduction. Liz, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I did want to. Thanks. So I would add that one of the we want to look at the big picture in this discussion. As Brian indicated, this is meant to be a dialogue between council and staff to help staff and council come together with a common understanding of what's important for the city, what's important for the work plans, and how those priorities mesh with the staff work plans that they're going to be putting together, and how consistent and measurable and trackable they can be. So at the end of the day, the big picture would be to provide direction on revenue sources. One of the things as you listen to the staff material is how should we use the ARP money? How should we use reserves? What do we understand about reserves? Do we have new revenue sources? And are we comfortable with the assumptions that staff has put forward in the material? Another question, big picture, is how to address program changes. We have any ideas and recommendations and thoughts? We want to be clear about those and how they might be handled. Brian mentioned the commission work plans. These were well thought out efforts by each commission. It's important for the council and staff to manage the expectations from the recommendations and requests of the various commissions. So we need to make sure staff buys into what's being proposed, or if the work or suggestions are appropriate now or in the future. There's some information on the CIP and CIPR. I'm going to come back to that in a minute and suggest we might change the order a little. And another big picture item is when we're looking at the budget, we all have a sense of what contributes to Campbell being Campbell and how the city council handles budgets to support community value programs. So I think that's going to be an important discussion later on when we talk about revenue recovery as a major discussion point. So at the end of the meeting, we're going to have for staff, I think, the basis of the 2022 budget, but also a clear understanding of the work plan priorities from that staff is going to go forward with based on the feedback and thoughts of council today. And I would encourage everyone to pull out their binder of the budget, the 2020 budget, 2021 budget, because I always forget that in that budget, there's a page before each department that describes what their priorities are, what their work plans are. And it's a good way to check back and see, are we meeting the priorities of the council from last year? So kind of pulling everything together, this is meant to be a good working consensus building discussion. And the other, so that's that. The other item I wanted to ask council is staff has prepared some presentations. We do have a lot of information in the staff reports. So I wanted to offer, we can have staff make presentations or we can ask questions. Would anyone like to just ask questions of what's in the staff report rather than having full presentations? Anyone have any thoughts?
I thought we were going to at least get a basic overview presentation.
Okay, I'm just asking because there's a lot of material in the staff report. So I didn't want to necessarily spend time doing that, but if council would like it, that's fine. So,
Well, I don't know how much detail, but I thought at least summarize, make a summary of the memo and the documents.
Okay, excuse me. Brian has on his schedule the preliminary update to the 7-year forecast taking 20 minutes. So I'm hoping that that would include questions. So Will, as the phrase goes, the screen is yours.
Oh, okay. Higher end mayor and council. I can put up a chart onto the screen. I would only put up a chart though, and I can go through. I can go through the projections. Just give a quick overview of what went in to them, and then also address any of the council's, the council's questions as well. So if that would if that would please the council, I will have that. Okay, so let me just put up something on the screen here real quick. Let me get to it. Okay. All right. Are you all able to see the screen? Okay. Good. Good. So in the materials that the council got, there's a great deal of detail about the projections out into the future from FY 22 to 8. But we also do a look back to the past to see where we were and where we came from. What you can see on the chart and stuff here, it shows our income and expenses from the past. Then also projects them out again to FY 28. What you see is that FY 20, due to COVID, there was a big impact. There was a big impact to our income, and our income was under expenses in FY 20, which caused a deficit to occur. In FY 19, just the year before, the income in the general fund was above the expenses by about, I believe it was about, let me get that number. I had it, but the key thing to cite is that there are periods of time that income is either above or below expenses, and this a chart it details that, and then out into the future, we do project a slight surplus amount of about 180K in FY 22. But once we get into FY 23, if the current trends continue, it could then turn into a $2 million deficit in the general fund. Now this also could decrease to a general fund deficit of about 180K in FY 24, if the current trends were to continue. But but also if a council were to not do any, 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 anything extra to either cut costs, to also increase our income, to adjust a, a different a, 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 a taxes. And in terms of income, what these projections what they assume is that our 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 taxes our key taxes will show a strong growth in FY22. And so by the end of FY22, they will typically return to pre COVID amounts, except for uh, TOT. We still assume that TOT it's in for a long recovery, and we don't expect that TOT will return to 100% until we get out to about FY26. But our different key taxes due to pent up demand, due to COVID cases be, be, beginning to decrease and coming under control, due to the opening up of different pieces of the economy. The consensus across different economists is that there will be a strong GDP growth of about 6.2 to 6.3% in the current year, which is a really big GDP amount. I don't think since 1983, 84 or so, that GDP growth that it's been above 6%. So if the current trends continue, it should be a really good higher through the end of December, and then into 22, it's projected to still be a growth, and then when we're talking about costs, we don't assume that every cost will return in FY22. But in our rec department, we do currently assume pending council's input, that there will be some partial return of a cost and programs. And then in FY 23, that if a council were to agree, that they would then come back all the way. But in terms of payroll costs, we assume that current pay tables and pay amounts and rights will stay about the same. We don't expect that those will increase, but we do expect that healthcare PERS, based upon a typical trends, will increase. And so when you take it all into account, it does show again a deficit amount of about 2 million in FY 23, but due to the aid that we also expect to get both in the current year and then also in FY 22, that we do expect a slight surplus if a council agrees what we would put in. So with that, I will then open it up to council, and I will unshare the screen as well.
Thank you, Will. So Will, can you leave that slide up, please? And what I would like to begin the discussion with, so that we all know what we're looking at here. The green line, which shows revenues, includes the, I'm going to say $4 million, the $3.9 million from the ARP Act, and it includes another 500,000 odd money we received from, I think, CARES Act. So one of the things that I think is going to be very important as we go through this discussion is that, do we include the ARP funding as an automatic money into fiscal year 2022, or do we set it aside for specific uses? And I say that because the staff report indicates that the ARP money can be used through 2024. So when you look at the green line here, you do not actually see the fact that the city's revenue was down $11.8 million from the earlier budget meetings. It looks like we were only down about 5 million, and we were actually down about 11 million. So we want to be sure that this is a really critical discussion that staff has incorporated into the 7-year forecast. So I just put that out there to make sure we're all on the same wavelength about what we're looking at. So do we have any questions on this at the moment, or shall we move forward? Nobody's hands are raised. Yes. Councilmember Bybee. I can see the yellow flag hands if people want to use them.
I had a question regarding the expenditures in FY22. So the red line assumes that expenditures will revert back to pre-COVID in the area of supplies and services to some extent. Is that understanding?
So they do return a bit, but not 100% all the way to the amount that they were pre COVID. So it's a partial amount. And then by FY23, we assume for right now, pending council's input, that they would return to almost 100% again.
So the council has some discretion then in directing that the expenditures remain at the status quo level that that the FY21 budget in the area of program supplies and services. Is that correct, Will?
Correct. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, I would just offer that in terms of some of the assumptions, I think last spring when we were making these similar kinds of assumptions, they were pretty rosy at the time. And the assumption was that we would be back pretty well between July, by September, things would be good. And by December, things would be very good. And obviously that didn't happen. So I am I'm of the position that these assumptions are, although well-founded, I agree. I think from a council's perspective, we need to be even more conservative. So I would like to offer that I think the sales tax, the TOT staff was good about explaining that. As I said last time around, my projections for TOT are much lower. And I think the sales tax is going to be lower because we've lost a lot of businesses and we don't have a sense of that yet. Also, the same is true with licenses and permitting. We don't have a sense of how many businesses we've lost. Yet there was a big revenue loss identified in the mid-year for 2021. So I think that these revenue projections are too optimistic. And I would like to offer that I think council should see the revenue without the ARP money being spent. I think we need to see the chart, which helps explain why this year we're in the black and next year they're showing a $2 million deficit. So I think we need a reality check so that when we have this money from the ARP, we are very conscious about how we spend it and over what time frame we spend it. So we can talk about that more if we'd like, but that would be my input. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that at the moment. Councilwoman Landry?
Yes, thank you. I would want to be conservative also. And I don't know if we take out all of it as part of the discussion or half to fill in the gaps in the budget.
And Councilmember Lopez?
I appreciate the Mayor, as you mentioned, the kind of elaboration on in the report on TOT and how staff is being very conservative there. I think it would be helpful to kind of walk us through your reasoning and where some of these numbers are coming from for some of the other areas, but definitely appreciate that on TOT. You know, I see where staff took our input and our direction from previous discussions. So very much appreciate that. Well, could you speak a little bit more about the surplus projected at the very tail end of that? Is that from TOT coming back a bit more?
So it's due to oh, my screen just went off. It's due to a TOT returning, but it's also due to a typical growth in all of our in all of our different income streams. So by the end, if our income and expenses were to continue upon a typical trend, then we could say a surplus amounts, and they would then begin to grow. But I mean, I do also agree with the mayor in that if you look at the trend of income from a fiscal year 19, and you were to take it out to, if you were to take it out to fiscal year 20, if a COVID didn't ever occur, then we really should be about a 60 million in income a total per year in FY20. And also, I mean, that also would continue to grow above by 3%. So although the income does return in the out years, we're still well behind where we should be if COVID didn't occur.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Lopez?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay. And I think next, there was going to be a discussion about the general fund reserves. Is that on your? And again, I would offer that we can have a discussion. I think the purpose of this discussion is to decide should any general fund reserves be used in the forecast going forward, and should the structure of the general fund reserves be changed, or should how might the reserves be replenished? So I think there's three issues there. So I think Are we going to have a presentation on that?
I didn't put one together. Although I can certainly go through anything that the council would want to discuss. If there are any changes that you would potentially potentially want to see occur, or also if there are any questions about where we were at the end of FY20, where we expect to be at the end of the uh, uh, at the end of the current year, and also where we expect to be out into the future, but also how we expect or could return anything that we've taken out as well. So I will open that up to council, but I can go whatever way that you want to.
So I think just to confirm that the discussions that you put forward with the 7-year forecast for the next few years does not include using any reserve.
So in FY23, if we weren't to either reduce our costs or to increase our income, then there could be the need for a draw, but also anytime that there would be a surplus amount, that also could be returned to the reserve accounts as well.
So our policy has been that if there were reserves, if there were revenue above expenditures, then we could allocate that to reserves. That's been the policy.
Yes.
So that would be possible. Okay. Does anyone have any comments about the reserve funds, how they're used, and at this point in time, keeping it the format the same? Vice Mayor?
Oops, hit the wrong button. Thank you. Will, looking at the chart you have on page 14, this shows the reserves as of the audited balance 6/30/20. But do we have a balance we can see, a current balance? So I see like the economic fluctuation reserve actually went up 181,000 year to year. Where is it now?
Until we get to the end of June, we don't set the we don't set the amount. It's a accounting entry, but based upon the current based upon the current projections of both income and expense, I do expect that it will go up a bit. Well, I mean, our total general fund, our total general fund reserves by the end of June should increase.
And Vice Mayor Resnikoff, there's a graph number 2 in the memo that Will sent out to us over the weekend. And that's why I was asking my question, because it shows target for the reserves, and then it shows the actual and projected
Is that-
reserves substantially below that.
So is that in this, that's not in this reserve 1E, is that in a one, is that in 1I?
So if you go to page 3 of the report, it's under a graph 2, and it shows the target amount, and then what we expect to occur based upon income and expense. So we do expect to be under the under the council set target amounts.
So Will, let me just be really clear. When you're referring to the report, you're referring to attachment I, the memo
Yes.
with attachment I?
That's, yeah, thank you, Brian. That's what I'm asking. It's in I then, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And it's on, so let me, I just want to shoot.
So
to
it's,
that. I got a table 2 and I. Okay.
got it.
These are a little confusing because what Will sent out is consolidated into, Will's multiple 5 reports are consolidated here. So they're not the same. Okay. Okay, that's it for the, thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to backtrack one thing, and I think Councilmember Lopez asked me something and I didn't answer it. I think you were asking me why I was feeling that the TOT tax was still too optimistic. And I just multiplied 4.8 times 0.5 because the room rates have gone down 50% on average. And the occupancy rate is between 30 and 50%. So I just multiplied 4.8 times 0.5, which is 2.4. And then I multiplied it by 0.5 again for occupancy, which brought it down to 1.2. And that doesn't take into account a bunch of other things they told me. But so and the forecast that was discussed in the industry projected, as staff has indicated, that it'll be till 2025 before the industry starts to really come back where it was. And they're going to maintain low room rents until the occupancy goes up. So that was the basis of my comment, that I think it's a little too optimistic.
And Mayor, I don't think I asked, but I do appreciate the insight.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, what's next on your discussion?
So, Madam Mayor, next, we were going to talk about the ARP allocation in the budget.
Okay.
And again, we don't have a specific slide in this, as this was introduced. The revenues from the federal rescue plan are normally general fund revenues, and we've reflected them in the budget. In the current budget year that way, and in the forecast that way. And the mayor's comments earlier, if you looked at the 7-year financial forecast and you see fiscal year 2022 being balanced, $3.8 million of that is ARP money, that's revenue coming in. It is general fund money, was intended to reimburse cities for lost revenues. And so it's shown that way. I think the question the mayor has is the council interested in programming that money separately from the general fund and looking at additional projects or programs for that? This budget that we've shown you in these figures we've shown you doesn't assume any of that. Just assumes where we are status quo with that money programmed into the general fund.
Thank you. So one of the things that has been my questions consistently, I think, is what is the basis for what the council wants to talk with staff about in terms of priorities and what that translates into work plans and money. And we need to identify, I think, a clear understanding of our normal revenue that's going to be a shortfall. This project, this projection here includes returning all positions back and no changes, it doesn't address any systemic challenges that we have. So one approach is to set aside the ARP funding and look at the work plans, the organization and council priorities to be consistent with the revenue we have, which is the norm. And then go to, so say we've talked a lot about cost recovery. There are different programs that we have that the city has traditionally not had cost recovery on. And if that influences our decision about how to address what I'm going to use the phrase structural problems in our financial forecast, if we set aside the ARP money to help maintain elements that are really important to our community, but are not cost recovery. So I just think it's worth a discussion. I don't know if others do, to understand how the ARP money should be utilized in planning going forward. I'm thinking that we really need, the council and staff need to work together to really think how we can cut down our costs, cut back and live within our means. And the ARP money can be extended out over a couple of years. You can see by the projections for the fund, reserve funds are staying low. So there's a lot of future out there where we can't assume we're not just pushing the financial problem down the road. So that's why I'm asking about the ARP money. What's the best way to use it? Rather than just backfilling and all of our vacant positions and frozen positions and going back to the status quo, and then knowing the next year we've got to go back down again, and then we're not building up our reserves again. So that's why I thought the discussion on ARP was important. Okay. No other comments? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Councilwoman Landry?
I don't know right now if this is the right time, but one of the things that came up to me was this Prop 19, the property tax change. Is that have been factored? Are we going to get, basically, are we going to get more percentage of the property tax because some properties are going to go up because of Prop 19?
So I don't know all the details. I don't know all the details of the prop, but if they were to do any type of a split or how, if commercial tax rights were to be a split, and they could then go up by a higher amount than 2%, then potentially there could be a greater amount that could come in. I mean, I think the one thing that's a caution is that if you do increase the tax rates on a commercial, then it also could push some away. It could push some away, and they could go to different states where the tax rates are how. So I mean, it's not put in to our current our current projection amounts. But it either could help, but also at the same time, it could hurt as well.
My understanding, and I don't know a whole lot, but just in talking with a couple people, that it's not just commercial property, that it also goes to second homes and rental properties. Has the assessor's office given any indication of if they think how much it's going to go up?
I've not heard any details to date, but it's a thing that I can check. I can check into, and then return to a council with additional information.
I'd like to see that. I mean, is it going to add 500,000, $1 million? Is it going to take away money? But from what I've been hearing, though, it is supposed to have the overall cumulative property taxes go up. So I'd like more information on how that might impact us, if they're giving any projections. I think I heard it took effect March 15th.
Okay. I'll check into that.
Okay. Councilmember Bybee.
So I just wanted to make a general comment about the ARPA and use of it. I feel that it's should be used to balance the budget this year or for 2022. But I also feel that we need to continue to reduce expenditures where necessary, where we can. I wouldn't support going back to our pre-COVID or even some increase in supplies and services until we get through the pandemic. I think that list of vacancies, the staffing should also be looked at, and not automatically assume that we're going to fill all those positions. I really think as an organization, we need to look at our structure, and this is the opportunity to be making changes in our staffing, in our programs, where we can make reductions. You know, are all those positions needed? They've been vacant for quite some time. So I think staff really needs to evaluate that. And I think that's part of the bigger discussion that we need to have, as well as we're, you know, possibly reducing programs at some point. And I don't know if that's going to happen in this discussion or during the budget process, but I think it all needs to work together. We can't just, long term, we need to be looking at the structure and being able to afford the services that we provide.
All right. Any other comments? Thank you, Councilmember Bybee. All right. We haven't talked about additional revenue sources. We can perhaps talk about that in the next segment of our discussion. And staff has suggested talking about the CIP projects now with some background. Again, I think staff can provide some summaries, but council would be particularly interested in some of the new CIP projects, as well as the status of some of the major CIP projects, and the question of why there's so much carryover on some of the projects, and what does that mean in terms of money. I did clarify with the finance director that there is some money in the carryover column, that when the projects finish, ideally at the end of this fiscal year, there will be money coming back, but that's an unknown until the end of the year. So does staff have any comments on CIP?
I'm happy to talk about that a little bit if you like, Madam Mayor. So hopefully you can all pull up attachment H in the packet. Attachment H has a header on it of Capital Improvement Program fiscal year 22 through 26 is an attempt to try to consolidate our vast CIP program into about a page and a quarter. So as the mayor has mentioned, we would not call this a fully complete proposed CIP at this point. But what this really is a snapshot in time of where we are related to current open CIP projects, and then some of the projects that we are contemplating bringing forward as part of the proposed. You'll see at the top of that page that there are 5 new projects that we really do have some good definitive information on. There's 2 public works projects. One is a creek trail extension. One is a highway interchange project that would be primarily funded with revenue from Measure B, and 3 of them are related to public safety. Just below that, you'll see that there is about a half a dozen what we call additional appropriations, and those are what we typically refer to as annual projects that we do every year. We continue to fund annual street maintenance. That's the largest one on there, and that's one that I think you're all familiar with, as we've recently finished the Winchester Boulevard project, and will be returning to local streets and roads for the next couple of fiscal years. The existing projects probably requires a bit more explanation, because this is really kind of a compilation of what you might generally refer to as carryover projects, but there's probably no one definition that fits all. In essence, these are all projects that have been previously budgeted. So that would be in fiscal year 21 or prior, and they all have made some level of progress, or in some cases maybe not so much. Many of these projects are in progress and are likely to be closed at the end of the fiscal year, as the mayor has alluded to as well. The one thing to be aware of on many of these projects, though, is that we tried to give a summary there in that source of funds column that speaks to where the funds come from. It's probably as common as not that these would have any impact on the general fund, because by and large, our CIP program does not 100% totally rely on the CIPR, which is really our capital fund that's the most in tune with the general fund. So in the cases of some projects where they might be a park fund project or a street maintenance project, at the close of those projects, the funding will typically revert back to its funding source. So a park fund project that has an unspent balance, those funds go back to the park fund. And even in the cases there where you will see that some of these have a CIPR component, what this doesn't really tell you is what percentage of that. So in the case of say of a Winchester Boulevard project that was a $5 million project, that only had really just a couple $100,000 worth of CIPR funding. That was largely funded through SB1 money, through VTA Measure B money, and then a couple of our impact fees that we also get through solid waste and construction tax. So the intent here is for us to try to clean this up by the end of the fiscal year. We have projects in here which will be completed. We do have projects in here that are in progress, and we will continue, though our recommendation would be to carry most of those forward, and unless there is any specific recommendation or inquiries from the council that would indicate otherwise. And in some cases, we have projects that we were not able to start yet, and that was largely a function of that was, to be quite honest, that was largely a function of resources. So a couple of these projects, which would have been typically handled by our building maintenance division, were not started because I think, as the council knows, we did have some staffing issues where we did not have that supervisor position on for the majority of the last fiscal year. But now that that position is filled, we will be moving forward with most of those projects. If you would like us to go through any of the funding, of the funding sources or of the source and use in more detail, I would hand it over to Nora to do that. But I would probably pause at this point and see if the council would like kind of a deeper dive into the detail, or are there questions or comments that we can take at this point?
Let's try for questions and comments and see what we need from there. So are there any questions or comments? Councilwoman Landry?
I'm referencing the traffic calming. It's on the second page of the CIP plan summary. It shows a 60,000 plus or minus carryover, but then it shows nothing in 2022. And I'm hearing from community members that, especially over here in Campbell Village, well, we wanted a traffic calming study, but we've been told there's no money.
Well, you will recall that when we balanced the budget prior to fiscal year 2021, we did remove some projects from the CIP at that time in terms of ongoing funding. Traffic calming was not recommended for additional funding because, in essence, the short answer is we haven't spent all the money yet. So we still have 60,000 there. We've already completed, we just recently completed East Campbell Avenue, as I'm sure you know, and we're working on Ridgely right now. And the answer that there is no money to do a traffic calming study is not correct. The answer in some cases may be that the streets that have been contacted, when staff has been contacted regarding some streets, the streets don't meet the council adopted criteria for traffic calming. Because as you will recall from that criteria, there are certain volume and speed thresholds that need to be met. And most local streets, to be quite honest, in this city and many other cities, are just not meeting that criteria. And it's been difficult to do that over the last 12 months or so, because there's been such a significant change on traffic patterns. So many of the local streets where we've had problems with regard to what can be termed cut-through traffic, the cut-through traffic isn't occurring at the same level because the traffic on the arterials has been reduced. So we've seen that in a couple cases, pretty significantly. And so unless the council would like to entertain the notion of us recrafting the policy, the best thing to do on that might be to resurvey the streets when traffic gets a little closer to normal and see if the streets would qualify at that point. But at this point, our backlog of streets that qualify is, I think there's only 2 or 3 more streets that qualify, and $60,000 seems sufficient for us to take those on with the current with the current resource level. We can certainly add more to the budget if that would be council's desire, but we have not fully expended the amount of resources that have been appropriated to that to this point.
So I guess my question was, there's 60,000 listed as a carryover, but it doesn't show money in 2022. All of it are dashed lines, and it looks like we're not spending that 60,000.
Councilmember Landry, let me jump in. This is not a proposed CIPR. We have a program. We haven't put pen to paper and extended those carryovers yet. What I'm hearing Director Capurso say is, as we prepare for a draft CIP to present to the council, it would be our intent that most of those carryovers likely would be programmed this year, with some exceptions where council's already provided direction or the project's closed, and then we'll be closing those out. So it would be our intention with the traffic calming to carry that money over into this fiscal year. unless the council's indicating otherwise. I'm clearly hearing support for continued funding. I guess Todd's question is, should we increase that funding? But at the very least, without council's action, we would be proposing to carry that over.
So every project that's listed a carryover, because there's more projects with carryover than there are listed right now in 2022. So all of these will go into 2022 or beyond, or they'll be zeroed out or credit given as the projects are completed?
One of the above. We haven't applied that analysis yet. Today was just an opportunity to get your input before we did that work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a one size fits all because, you know, if it's a very well-defined capital project, you know, like a Winchester resurfacing or a JDM play lot, there is definitely a definitive beginning and end. But things like traffic calming, bike and ped improvements, those are typically not one single project. Those are a series of projects, and we try to go as far as the funding lets us go. So our practice has been to continue to carry those funds over, and what we don't expend in one year, we will expend in the following year.
So I don't know if this will help, but as we're going forward in some study sessions on the budget, if there could be a column here that covers status, meaning it is going to get carried forward or it's going to get closed. Some extra little bit of information would probably help council. I don't know if you'll need to do that depending on what your next level of documentation to go kind of want to have.
Yeah, our intent would be to certainly give you a little bit better status of that when we bring a CIP to you, which I believe we're targeting April 20th. But as the city manager has referenced, this is just a snapshot in time, and we really haven't put what's the phrase where we haven't put pen to paper yet. So this is where we are, and these are the currently active projects, and we're certainly open to any and all input at this point.
Okay, so I have a question since Councilmember Bybee, yes.
So I have a question. I'm still a little confused about the existing project list and the timing. And it doesn't seem to be consistent with the existing CIP that was adopted for 21-25. And the one specific project that I'm looking at is the community center track resurfacing. And in the existing plan, it indicates that the timing on that is year 3, but on this chart, there's no timing. Is that still a project that's going to go forward, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. And that's a very good point. So as you know, I think as many of you know, our CIP is not complicated enough. But then when we change the timing on a project in the middle of a fiscal year, it only adds to some of the complexity. So at one point we had budgeted the community center track project to be a year 2 or 3 project in the CIP. And that was under the assumption that the city was going to fully fund the cost of those improvements. So as many of our projects often do, we found a grant opportunity that would have allowed us to move that project forward. So that was a CDBG type funding that we identified. We went to council on that some number of months ago. I don't recall exactly when. And our proposal was to accept, was to make a budget adjustment essentially and move the project from year 3 to the current fiscal year, which would be fiscal year 21. And we would decrease the city's investment and recognize the CDBG investment. So you couple that with the fact that that we were just having problems getting to all of the projects, but for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. But in this particular case, it proved to be fortuitous because we have had some more recent conversations as we tried to confirm our $60,000 to $70,000 grant with CDBG. We've also became aware that because of the some rotation program that CDBG uses, the county program that is, that we will actually be able, or it's looking like we'll maybe actually be able to move that project forward at almost no cost to the city if we do it in fiscal year 22. So that information only came to us, I think, Monday of this week. So in some cases, as unfortunately, I know it's hard to follow because these things can become a moving target. But what we're working on now is hopefully a revised proposal for the track that you will see in the proposed budget, where the track would be a fiscal year 22 project, and probably 95 to 100% funded with non-city resources. So we think that that would be a win for us, and that's certainly on our radar. We recognize the importance of the track, and that's our plan at this point. So thank you for bringing that one up.
Okay. And then could you talk a little bit about the new project, the Pruneyard Creek Trail Extension? Does that have anything to do with the project at the Pruneyard where they were supposed to connect?
It does actually, and that was after years of what you might call I was going to say negotiation, but that's probably giving it too much credit. It was more of a three-way discussion between Ellis Partners, the City of Campbell staff, and Caltrans, trying to come to a solution on how a trail could be built along the eastern side of Highway 17, right along the edge of the Pruneyard. And to cut to the chase on that is that Caltrans is not going to work with anybody other than a public agency on that. So the expectation that the Pruneyard could actually perform that project themselves and then kind of hand it over to the city proved not to be viable. So the option that we're pursuing at this point would be that the Pruneyard would fund the project, hand a check over to the city, and then the city would work with Caltrans on the execution of a lease agreement, and then the construction of the trail segment itself. So that trail is in fact that same one that would run along the western edge of the Pruneyard, connect the Los Gatos Creek Trail from up near the parking structure down to Campbell Avenue near the portals. But it would be managed by the city, but funded by the Pruneyard project.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd.
Sure.
Thank you. I had the same question. Thank you, Councilmember Bybee. I just would like to emphasize that there is an obligation on the part of the Pruneyard to minimize any participation of city funds would be my goal on that one. Forgive
I
me.
have a follow-up question on that,
Okay.
on the trail. Last time, I guess about a year or so ago, when I was talking to the Pruneyard, they said, "Oh, well, we're just going to give you 100,000 and walk away." But we don't know if 100,000 is enough. And why are we only restricted to Caltrans property when there is some land that they might have? So I'm questioning that we haven't made a decision on basically how much money they're supposed to give us.
So Councilmember Bybee, I'm going to suggest, Councilwoman Landry, I'm going to suggest that's too much detail for the discussion we're in right now. The point is well taken, and staff can come back with some information on that when we do the budget.
That was the point I was trying to make, that we haven't agreed to that amount of money. And also, what about the money we were going to get from OPA, the 250,000, because of the, I forget what the traffic stuff, that's not in here anywhere.
I don't have any information on that at this point. I will have to look at that and try to get back with you. I'm not aware that money's been programmed into our CIP or not.
That was a requirement of the development to give us 250, and at the time there was some level of discussion about it going to traffic parking signage and whatever electronic.
Councilwoman Landry, I think, and I'd have to go back and look at that specifically, but my recollection is those were tied to occupancy, granting of occupancy of the permit, which they're not near at this point. So we can see at the timing of that may not be this fiscal year.
But they're going to be done within the next year.
Yeah, it should be done in the CIPR.
Yeah, it's going to be done within the next year,
Yeah, we'll note that when we come back to you and we'll address that.
because that would be deciding if it is going to go to parking signage or not.
That was a good pickup there. Vice Mayor Resnick, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, just real fast. I know you don't want to go into detail, and staff can bring this back in April. But the Pruneyard project goes back many years and Mayor, you may have been on planning then. I think right about that time, you may have just left. That project, as far as the land use and the cost, was built into the approval. So I think we do have limitations there, and this is a method of paying it so they can close it out. But staff, Todd, you can bring that back and confirm later, but I'm pretty sure we defined where it would be and a maximum cost that they would have to pay. And the expected cost, if I remember right, was below what the 100,000 is. So anyway, if you can confirm that in April, I think we have an obligation there to accept under certain terms.
Yeah,
My
that's a good point.
understanding,
Yeah,
my understanding was they had to build it, that there wasn't a fixed dollar amount, but that they had offered the 100,000.
So staff is going to come back and answer. all
Okay.
those questions.
That's not 100% correct. It was actually an approved condition of approval, and we will get you more detail on that. But as the Vice Mayor has alluded to, there was a pretty definitive condition of approval on that. And as I said earlier, they will not be able to build that project themselves because of the way Caltrans operates. So we'll give you more information on that.
Thank you. I have, it's getting close to 10:30, so I want to make sure we keep things moving. There were two things. Did I miss the Campese Road Bridge?
You did not miss it. It is still on our unfunded list.
Where is, I didn't see it on the list. That's what I
It's
was.
not, I don't know that the unfunded list was provided in this presentation. It's typically provided in the CIP document every year. So I don't know that we provided that. I'm looking in the council packet right now. I don't see that. So
I don't see it. Yeah. I
again,
don't
that
see
is
it.
something that we'll bring you back the list of the unfunded list as part of the proposed CIP. So that way, if the council has any concerns about something that is still unfunded at that point, we can discuss options, how to maybe get that funded and at the expense of something else. But yes,
Right.
that's
Right. And so just FYI to everybody, there is another list of other types of unfunded projects that we want to keep on our radar. What, forgive me for not knowing this, what is the Axon Office Safety Plan?
I'm going to have to call upon our police chief to help us with that one.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to discuss that. Currently, our Axon contract contains our body-worn cameras, our in-car cameras, tasers, our evidence storage. And right now, all of those different functions are billed separately. So as we move into different billing cycles, we're trying to look for ways to optimize those services with the expanding technology. So by taking all of those services and combining them into one 10-year contract, we're estimating that over that 10 years, there'll probably be in excess of $2 million in savings. And that will allow us the opportunity to be up to date with the equipment that we're using, the best practices, the training that comes with those services. So it's really just a matter of combining what we currently have and looking for a cost-effective way to keep that.
So I would, and then down below, there's the police mobile data computer replacement program for another 200,000. I would simply offer that we've been replacing a lot of equipment in the vehicles. Not long ago, we gave funding for all new computers in the car and all new systems. So I would be looking for, when staff comes back, a very good analysis of what money has been spent in the last 5 years and the cost benefit you're describing, because it seems like we're doing a lot of this equipment replacement. So I just want to, have my memory checked to make sure we understand how the money is being amortized over time. And no, we don't keep updating things, kind of thing. I appreciate what you're trying to achieve, but I think council's going to need to see a lot of detail on that analysis. And Councilmember Lopez.
And I agree with the mayor's input, and I would just add to that. I think it's important for council to understand not just why, speaking generally, these are important improvements, which, I think we could all probably see the importance of that, but why now at this point in time, and for us to have that perspective and input. And not making a decision one way or the other, but just to have a better sense of that.
I'd be happy to either provide more information now, or when we bring that back, I can definitely have.
I think when you bring it back. And is the digital radio replacement also a PD item?
It is. And just kind of going back to your other comment about the computer replacement, that actually we're hoping we're working well with the new police building. Those new laptop computers will allow us to go to a paperless option, and those will replace any report writing computers that would be inside the new police department. So there would be a cost savings associated with that and the Measure O move. But I'm sorry for the radio.
Yes.
You have a question on that?
Yeah, so my comment just is there's 800, 900, $1 million, about $1,250,000 in costs for PD, computer equipment, and radio and all of that. As Councilmember Lopez just said, that's a lot of money for us right now. So we're going to need, I would suggest council will need a solid information on that. To make sure that this is the right time to spend that kind of money, given where we are financially. Okay, and
I have a comment, Liz.
yes.
Sorry, I'm getting concerned about public contract and sole sourcing. There are a lot of things that are listed by name, by a brand. And my understanding of the public bidding code and purchasing is you have to have or equals. And it seems like we're getting away from that. And I know there's been recent construction projects that I've raised that issue. And like I said, right now, there's a couple things listed in here by brand. Shouldn't we be looking into, are we complying with not having to just sole source everything?
So that's a general comment that staff can address going forward. Thank you for that. Okay, any other comments here? Okay, so I'll look forward to seeing more information and a clearer status on these projects. And I think you've heard consistent questions about the new projects. Those are really new, so they need to be understood a little bit better. All right, it's almost 10:30. We have staff would like to be sure that we have time to go over a preliminary discussion of fees and licenses. And we could perhaps try for a brief or a focused discussion, big picture on fees, and then take a break. The fees are things like business license, the fee schedule, park dedication fees. There was one comment about from one of the commissions on impact fees and additional fees. And so staff would like, I think, last year talking about business licenses and fees that are in our packet. Last year, staff report covers 4 options. Last year, we did not raise our business licenses. This year, we can raise our business licenses. We can raise them and recover from last year, or we can not do any raise of the business license, and staff had one more option. Staff indicated in the report that last year they thought the city lost about $160,000 in revenue. I think that was the number. And I think that, yeah, 161,000. The problem is that we've lost a lot of businesses. So in the previous reports, it said we've lost a lot of money in business license renewals. So this is a pretty iffy category. And the discussion is revenue for the city versus impact on businesses. So does anyone have any discussion on that? Does anyone want to raise the business licenses this year? Or what? What are council members' choices? Vice Mayor Resnikoff?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of raising them this year. I think we should not be burdening the businesses. I have a question for the Community Development Director. Do we know, Paul, I assume, Paul, you're there? There you are. Do we know how many businesses have gone out? Are there any statistics? I mean, anecdotally, we all see certain locations empty, right? But I also see some grand openings, which is surprising but pleasing to see. Do we know what we've lost? How many have really gone out? So how many of the non-renewals are due to that specifically versus people just aren't going to pay, during a pandemic?
Unfortunately, I don't have numbers on how many have gone out. I can certainly perform that research and get back to the council. I think our business licensing and the finance director could probably chime in as well. We really need to get a handle on the renewal process of the business licensing program. I know we're trying to improve it now. Just obtaining contact information for one is something we're continuously working on. So once we can get a handle on the overall program, I think we'll be able to pull the metrics and data a little bit easier. So right now it's anecdotal in terms of different businesses that are leaving. With that said, we are seeing an uptick now on businesses coming in, especially Hamilton Plaza. We're seeing some pretty decent uses coming into that center. Grocery Outlet, as you know, has opened up at San Tomas. So there are some pretty substantial businesses that are coming in. It's the mom and pops that are really hurting right now.
Right. It would help to know. The Grocery Outlet, by the way, is a great win. That's a great.
Yeah.
To take that spot too, how many can take a CVS spot? So that's a great thing. But if we could find out, maybe the chamber has some statistics just of chamber members, it would help us understand what's coming. Just one other suggestion: if we do in fact waive, say, fees for a year, waive increases, maybe tie that into businesses registering. And when you register, you get a waiver of this for the first year. So we have them for the second year, right? San Jose's reached out. They do it by threat, right? If we found you, if you pay up now, you don't get a penalty. But instead of that, maybe offer something to say, register now, you get a benefit in the next year, but then we have them for the following years. Maybe that would help.
That would be the better way.
I agree, because I've been on the receipt, a client on the receipt of getting that letter. It's nasty.
Yeah.
But apparently very effective. But
So
they spent money to get the data.
Yeah, sorry, I would offer that the finance department did send out a spreadsheet of the category of businesses that we lost and that we gained. And it was really weird because my memory, Will, was it said we lost 300 businesses and we gained 300 businesses, but the value of the business licenses had gone down substantively in our revenue. So.
Right. And a point of that is if we lost 5 mom and pops, which is horrible, but we picked up a Grocery Outlet, they're not equivalent. So we need to know what the mix is and where they are. And it's probably not that easy to get, but it's good info, be critical info.
I think it'd be great info.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else, Councilmember Lopez, your hand is showing.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this discussion, and I see this as a critical piece. I mean, I fully understand how time intensive that can be. It's not easy to get that information, to get that you know, the contacts, but I think for us to be able to make some informed decisions around this and going forward and to uh, next month, that this would, you know, and just going forward in the future, that it would be important to have this data. Um, and Vice Mayor, I love your idea about the kind of using that as an incentive to help get that started. I think that'd be really smart. But you know, I see this as important enough to these discussions that you know, we should be willing to devote the staff time to it, and be able to get a better handle on what's going on.
So I would offer that this is a good place to take a break with the segue, taking a look at the priority sessions, priorities matrix from 2021, one of which is specifically council adopted policy is financial recovery and help businesses recover. We really haven't done a lot for business recovery, and freezing these with a nice little incentive mentioned by the Vice Mayor. The cost of is not small to not increase the value of the business licenses, but I'm quite strongly in favor of not raising them at this point in time. The county is also eliminating the cost for health inspections for restaurants. And there's some other fees for businesses that are being held back. And a lot of businesses owe back sales tax. And I think we need to be as supportive as we can be to let them pay back what they need to get paid back to get back on even street. Our fees are not that great, but I think it's a commitment by the city. I think it's a strong commitment by the city. So I would be in favor of not raising them. Any other comments? Okay.
Completely agree in terms of the fees.
So sorry, what?
I completely agree with what you said about the fees and not raising them.
Thank you. Okay, so shall we take a break? Let's see, it's 10:36. Do you want to come back at 10:45? And we will perhaps get into a similar brief discussion about the fee schedule. Try and get through that quickly, and then focus on council priorities, unless we haven't covered anything that staff wants to see covered. Okay? Okay, good. See you in a few minutes. we're almost ready to return. Okay. And where are we? Thank Vice Mayor Resnikoff. Okay, so thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. And I would like to offer for the next an hour and 15 minutes. I want to be sure and leave time at the end of the meeting to do a final round of comments and confirm consensus. And the items we want to confirm consensus on are the 7-year fiscal forecast with revenue and expenses and assumptions. That would include a confirmation of how the ARP money should be included in those projections. Conclusion on the business license fees, the fees that we're going to discuss now, the CIP projects, anything we want to comment on that, last minute comments and consensus, and commission plans, such that at the end of the meeting, the staff is comfortable that they have the basis of budget assumptions and the basis of work plans, all in the context of the priorities of the council, which we will focus on at 11 o'clock. And we'll go around for that input. So quickly, I think the commission plans that were in our packet were very helpful to read and understand. I would like to suggest that staff take a look at those and comment on what can and can't be done in their work plans. I noticed some of the items were already in progress, work items, and that some of the others might be addressed in things like the housing element update that's going on. So if anyone has any specific comments on the work plans proposed by the commissions and boards, any thoughts?
I don't seem to have gotten that.
That's in attachment 1C, as in cat, 1C.
To whose email?
It's in the packet, but it was also sent out.
Okay, I'm looking, I don't see it here.
1C, all the attachments, 1C. In the packet, it's page 9 on what I have. Take a look at the email from Andrea that put the whole packet all together.
Starts on page 8 of the PDF.
Thank you. Starts on page 8.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll ask Councilmember Mayor Resnikoff his question first.
Yeah, just a comment or two on that. When it comes back to us, we specifically do grants through CIC, so we should have the idea of, we should have the amounts of what those grants are, because that's not in there. So we need to know for the neighborhood beautification, there may be, in the, there's the other ones, I'm forgetting what they were, the social services, sub-grants. we need the amounts. And then the only other question I had was, there's a reference on the Mills Act through HPB of the loss of an intern. Brian, was that a paid position? HPV? The intern working the Mills Act?
Sorry, my microphone is muted. I believe so.
Yes.
Sorry, was I didn't hear you. Is that yes?
That's correct.
He said yes.
So is that on the list of frozen positions then? Is that we're
Yes.
that one?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an issue with all the job holds. That's fine. Okay, thank you.
So, thank you. These are the kind of grants and programs that I'm thinking might be good use for the ARP funding as community outreach, community support, community character. Okay, so if no one else has any comments on them, I would just offer that I do think a lot of the Planning Commission comments are very worthwhile to read as a council. And I do think a lot of them will be addressed in the housing element. So we'll wait and see what the staff comes back with on that. Is that acceptable, City Manager?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is the fees, and the fees go on quite a bit. And I am going to suggest that we identify items that we want to speak to. One is what should be raised, should their cost of living be included in these fees, some of which are flat, set as flat amounts, and should those be changed? There was one item which caught my attention from last year, which was the fire department. We made some decisions about the fees on the fire department, if memory serves me correctly, not going up a huge amount that it could have, because our fees are changed substantively. So what are staff's thought on the fire department fees? And are there any other comments from staff on fees? So anyone have any questions about fees? Should the fees be increased by the 3% or 1%, whatever finance department is recommending?
Madam Mayor, if I can, the CPI increase this year for fees would be 1.72%.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Lopez.
When this comes back, I would love to have a little bit of a better understanding of a couple of factors. One is to the extent possible, how much do we collect from these fees? What kind of percentage of revenue is it? Because I would think that some of those decisions we may weigh it differently if it's something where it maybe comes up once a year and might have negligible impact if we increase it, versus something that would impact more people. So maybe another column there, just giving a sense of that. Because otherwise it's difficult to make these decisions. It seems a little bit arbitrary. You can look at the absolute amount, but I think it's missing some important context.
So sometimes, and I think perhaps the finance director and the city manager offline can give you some more information that you're looking for. A lot of fees are based on cost recovery. That is the core of what the majority, not all of these, but the majority of these fees are related to cost recovery. And they will affect virtually everything that comes into the city: planning, public works, fire department, recreation, that. It's central. It's very central to the general fund funding.
If I can add, we'd be glad to provide that detail when we bring this forward, Councilmember Lopez. I think you're right. It is a little bit of a vacuum to not understand the context, and all the fees range in their ability to be cost recovery. Last time we reported to the council, we did a full fee study, was in May 7th of 2019. And we can share that information of when we set those fees with you. That's really easy to do, but just to give you a little snapshot of that, the range of fee recoveries anywhere from 37% to 100%. The fire fees were in that range. And the idea with the fire fees is that those under 50% cost recovery, we would quickly get to 50%. And those that were over 50% cost recovery with regard to the fire fees would incrementally increase 5% each year to eventually get to a full cost recovery. So that was 2019. Last year, we did not increase those fees, so we didn't make progress in those areas. But hopefully that addresses the mayor's comments about fire fees, just give you a snapshot of where we were with those. But generally, when we did that fee study, we did show what the cost recovery was of all of those fees, and we can provide that again.
Yeah, that would be helpful to have the at least the cost recovery percentages.
Councilwoman Landry, and then Councilmember Biden.
Helps to unmute. What if we did no fee increase on anything? What would the impact to the budget be?
So in a total, we're still pulling all of those details together, but I would expect that it would be about 100 to 200K impact if we don't do any fee adjustments. And then I will also point to council policy to point 6 that does go through how we should address cost recovery, how we should adjust and check the fees from a year a year. So if a council did wish to change if they wish to change the approach of how we recover a cost, dependent upon the type of pay, the purpose, I would suggest that you then go into 2.6 and make the adjustments to a 2.6 because it really does tell us what we should try to address and what we should propose to a council each time that we adjust them.
So the bottom line is if we do not increase fees at all, we're only going to be short of 200,000 at a max.
About that. I mean, I
Okay.
still need to go through it more, but I would expect between 1 to 200,000.
If that's the case, Mayor, I would say that could be something that I would support out of when you had mentioned not using the money that we're getting, and I said maybe using only half. I would say not raising fees, but then applying some of the money, the ARC money. I mean, that to me helps our business and community and our users of things like the community center.
Thank you. Councilmember Lopez?
And I think I would appreciate, Will, as you go through and having more context and getting more clarity on those numbers. But at this point, I would not necessarily support that. I think if we're going to look at, like the business fees, to me makes sense because you want to look at who's been most impacted and who we can help. But I'm not convinced yet. Although I'm open to the discussion that is the case across the board for all these fees.
Thank you. No one else? I am inclined, yes, Councilmember Bybee.
I was going to mention 2.6. Thanks, Will, for bringing that up. I think that might be helpful for Councilmember Lopez to maybe get a copy of that, because that does explain the user fee and cost recovery policy that's currently in existence. And I think that might be a good introduction to our fee policy. And I would support an overall fee increase based on the CPI this year. I think as those fees are paid by it's part of doing business, and as our economy is recovering and people are getting back to somewhat normal, we did have the economic stimulus that people received that is trying to promote business and moving forward. So I would support it. I think that by delaying it just sets us back somewhat on our fee recovery.
Thank you, Councilmember Bybee. I would agree with Councilmember Lopez and Councilmember Bybee. I think the business licenses are a little bit different. I think the fees, particularly since we froze them last year, I think it's appropriate to move forward with those. I would be supportive of looking at the fire fees to see if we might want to nudge those a little bit. And there's a couple of things that are zero fees that we might look. It looked to me like tree removals in new housing developments, which can be substantive, has no cost. I think there might be some fees in there. So I would just take a look at where there are no fees currently charged, and I am supportive of increasing it by the CIP. Okay, and with that, we will go over to, I think I've covered everything staff wanted covered. So I think what we need to do is talk about council priorities. Please pull up from your packet, attachment 1A. And it is the priorities from the 2021 study session, 2020 study session for the year 2021. And we all know the world was pretty crazy. We don't talk a lot on this spreadsheet about what was accomplished to meeting these priorities. I think going forward, we'll want to do that. But here is where I think there's a great opportunity for council and staff to really blend together what the work plans are showing in terms of what the council's priorities are. And in the budget, you will find work plans there. And sometimes they align with council priorities, sometimes they don't. So with that context, I'd like this conversation to go for half an hour. Each council member taking what they need, hopefully 5 minutes or so, have some dialogue, and then spend about 15 minutes rounding the conversation up with questions with staff and council members between us. And then the last 15 minutes to review any decisions or any directions and concurrences we might have reached on the items that we mentioned earlier. So who would like to begin talking about priorities, what the council thinks is important for the city to focus on?
Come on, you guys. I don't want to always be first here. Come on, Sergio, and speak up. there, Sergio raised his hand. Let him go first.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you, Councilman Landry. Most of these, looking at where we were a year ago and where we are now, I think a lot of these still hold up for me. Definitely financial recovery. We've been touching upon a lot of these. And I agree with the mayor, mayor's comments about seeking alignment between the commission work plans and some of these. I think would be a good way to prioritize what we can and can't do. The major one that I'd like to discuss and add to the discussion that I really don't see here, but that just in my time, a lot of the communication I receive from constituents, a lot of concerns around this is the issue of homelessness. And I know that in some ways that's the county, or there might be other organizations that work on that, but I know that staff in our police department have been doing what they can to work within the confines about that on a little bit of an ad hoc basis from what I can hear. And I think lifting this up as a priority would give staff a little bit more direction in that, help establish some of what we've learned. And I think the really good work that some folks in the police department and other city staff have been doing, and help formalize some of those best practices in terms of where we direct people and who we connect them to. But we'd just love to have some more discussion on that. I think it's going to continue to come up as we go through other priorities that we see here. Unfortunately, has really been it's one area that's really been impacted by the pandemic. So would love for us to put some good thinking behind that.
Thank you. Council member Bybee, or want to go next, or Councilwoman Landry? Councilwoman Landry?
Oh, Ann doesn't want to go next.
Well, you've got your hand, you've got your mic on.
Okay, so you had started out by saying, where are we at? What did we accomplish? So that we had 5 priorities last year. General plan update under comprehensive long-term land use planning. We aren't finished with that. I'd like to keep that as a priority. The legislation, it seems like the subcommittee's been doing well. Plan area or Bay Area 2050. So comprehensive, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little. Comprehensive long-term land use planning, I'd like to see to be a priority. Measure O, also. Fiscal stability, we're obviously talking about that. Then when we go to open space, JDM is under construction. I didn't see trails on the list. I do see the Campbell Park. The other thing I would like to add then is being an all-inclusive city. We are a dog-friendly city. We have what is called an all-inclusive playground, but to me, the whole city should be all-inclusive. If we build another playground, we should be trying to be all-inclusive as possible. It also goes to things like our handicap ADA facility upgrade. I think that goes to being all-inclusive by making that a priority. I think, I forget what the actual amount we're giving each year, but so if we're dog friendly, we should also be all-inclusive. I also on the, let's see, where is it here? The, the commission's work plans under CIC, they talked about mental health. I know we as a city don't have per se a mental health department, but we are doing things through Parks and Rec and the PD, especially with like the new therapy dog. But as a city, I think we should be looking at how that affects things like our homeless population. And if we're going to be addressing homelessness, then mental health falls in there somewhere. What types of things could we do for helping this situation? And then do we approve or let the CIC have that as part of their work plan?
We'll come back to a discussion on these points to see how they might fit in and all of that. Councilmember Bybee.
So I would support the continuation of the adopted priorities we have for this year. Measure O obviously is an ongoing project and will be. This fiscal stability and financial recovery should be a priority. And then open space and what we can do there. To me, the work plans need to be, and this hasn't always happened, or rarely happens, in that the work plans should be consistent with the priorities that we adopt, and we all should be working together with the same work plans and the same priorities. And so I'd like to see a better result on that as far as work plans, and having staff come back when we do our next study session on work plans, and seeing what we can do to incorporate what some of the commissions have suggested. And some of those seem pretty ambitious, and we as a council need to know what we can and can't do. If we want to do this, and it's going to affect this, and we need to have that conversation so that we're all on the same page and really working towards a more united approach to our priorities. I think the housing element is going to take a lot of staff resources, so that should be a priority. Based on the discussion at last council meeting on SB 1383 and implementing that process, that's going to take some staff resources. I don't know to what extent, but those should be included in the work plans that come back from staff. And to Councilmember Lopez's comments about homelessness, I think that really, it's an important issue. It's one difficult one to wrap your arms around because it is more of a county-wide effort, and the county should be leading the charge, but maybe coming up with some type of solution or some kind of support that we can address the unhoused in our community would be helpful. I know I served on the unhoused task force, and I think that's going to be coming back to our council in a meeting, and next meeting or so, about strategies that we can do to support the homeless. And again, I know it's county, and we as a city, we can't tackle it alone, but if we could have a better joint effort countywide with the cities, it would be helpful.
Madam Mayor, can I jump in just to add?
Sure.
Just to add on to Council Member Bybee's comments, we are expecting a presentation by the county on April 20th on their plan to end homelessness and asking for our support. And there may be some work that we can do in support of that leads to this conversation.
Thank you. I'd add also that there's a very strong community outreach to address homeless, and there's a kind of a nice ad hoc community group forming to address this, and I'm hoping we can leverage that so that it doesn't take city resources, but can move the issue of homelessness forward. So we'll keep you up to date on that. Vice Mayor Resnikoff.
Thank you. Yeah, I worry about adding more things on here, given our limited resources and some frozen positions. So I'm going to address just the ones we have. I support continuing them. I think my priorities on those have changed. I think the last, I'm jumping between screens here, excuse me. The last year has shown us the fiscal stability and financial recovery, I think, is paramount. That becomes the most important thing to me. I think that we've also seen that open space became more important because it became the area where people could have some normalcy in their lives if using parks and trails with masks and social distancing is normal. it became a very important thing for people. So I'm hoping we continue with that. And I think that Measure O is important because we have an obligation to deliver to what the voters asked for. And if we're going to continue to fund that, we have to deliver those projects. And that means lastly, what we call the comprehensive long-term land use planning, I think is very important. In this case, if I'm prioritizing those 4 categories specifically, that would be my last one. I'm not lowering the importance. I'm just prioritizing what I would put to first. So financial, open space, Measure O, and then the long-term land use planning. I'm not against looking at other things. I just don't know we have the resources. Homelessness is certainly a very valid thing. We all know the challenges, right? We all know the challenges in how much we can do and in doing something that's not regional. So I don't know the answer to that. It's certainly a valid priority. I'm interested in seeing what we can do resource-wise and actually to make it impact-wise. That's my only concern there. Ignoring it doesn't get us anywhere, so that's not the answer. But what is it? I don't know. But I'm certainly supportive of actions we can take, preferably regionally, because we know it doesn't help if Campbell fixes something and moves the problem to San Jose or vice versa. We saw that with the jungle when that went down, right? And Campbell got an influx. We need to work together with other cities and county. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start it off. I'm going to ask each of you as we go around one final time to think about work plan items that might relate to what your comments have just been. So let's see if I can come up with a good example at the moment. I had one that's gone out of my head. So I honestly don't think we can rank these 4, Vice Mayor. I think we're finding that we have to do all 4 of these. And the work plans from various departments will support doing this work. So for example, on the legislation, we are keeping the council and community informed of state legislation, but we haven't done a work plan. I think a work plan item is to be current. When there's new legislation, we need to have our ordinances kept current. So that to me is a strong work plan item. Under this, I think the housing element is now going to dominate what needs to be done. And I'll just mention, remember, we're talking July 2021 to the end of June 2022. It's always that going forward. So the housing element is going to take precedence for me over the general plan update. The Bay Area 2050, I think that's going to come into play under the housing element along with the RENA numbers. I think the work plan needs to include coordinating all of that information under the housing element. So frankly, I would let the general plan slide at this point. The other thing that's not here for work for a work plan element is the objective standards that are underway. So if you can see, I'm trying to come up with something to help staff understand when I make this a priority, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking of, sort of thing. So under Measure O, it is what it is clearly. Fiscal stability, I think we've provided some hopefully good direction today on what our priorities are. I'm going to add in under fiscal stability a comment which is called government efficiency. And for example, in this coming year, we need work plans that cover redistricting. We have some governance issues about transitions of council. It turns out we don't have a lot of policies and procedures in writing, and we need to do that. So to me, those are 2 work plan items, redistricting and governance. I also would say cross-training. I think one of the things we have to look at seriously is reducing staff. And that means that taking a hard look at the frozen positions and looking how they can be consolidated into more effective jobs, more effective positions. City manager's office is the one that's obviously got the most vacancies and the biggest challenges. I think that I'd like to see a work plan item on how that's going to be reorganized. And each one of these should have a time frame associated with it. So I think cross-training between departments, I don't know, but Public Works and Community Development, or Public Works and Recreation, something like that. I think it would help if there was more cross-pollination there. Again, looking to control headcount. Under financial recovery, I think we have to take a look at a work plan that's to reconsider the economic development approach. I think the Economic Development Department Subcommittee met and had a recommendation that we look to an outsourced company or service that can really promote economic development. It might also do some of our social media and communication, because that position has been pretty much absorbed by PD. So the city's public information and social media and that kind of thing it needs to be addressed. So I think that I would look for some plans in those areas for the fiscal stability and the financial recovery. I agree that we need to put in under this, and I'm struggling where to put it, but I think the things like SB 1387 is extremely important because it's a humdinger to impact our community and our businesses. So we need to figure out if that goes under financial recovery because it's going to impact finances. I'm not sure. But I think under fiscal stability, we need to look at how we can organize and take advantage of where we have frozen positions and where there's opportunity to make our government more efficient and take care of the loose ends. In terms of homeless, I don't honestly think we can take it on as a city, Councilmember Lopez. I do think we can take advantage of the community members that are willing to do some work and are doing some work. And I've mentioned some of this at council meetings. I'll mention more on Tuesday to do that. I'm agreeing with council member under fiscal stability. We've had a couple of lawsuits about ADA, and that's a waste of money. So I would say our work plan is really to put ADA access up front. I'm thinking specifically of the JD Morgan restrooms and possibly the Campbell Park restrooms. We cannot underestimate how much that's costing the city by not doing that work and not having a plan. So to me, that becomes a work plan priority. The all-inclusive city, I understand, but I'm not sure what that really means and how it really would fit in. So if that helps, that's what I'm trying to suggest. I'm good with these items, but I've added to them a couple of sub-bullets. Can we go around and see if anybody else has some work plan items that they would like to kind of put in that same context? Councilwoman Landry.
Thank you. I agree with the stuff you had brought up, Liz. I'll re-emphasize a couple points. Economic development. When the subcommittee met, I had suggested that instead of calling it financial recovery, we call it financial revival. Try to put it in a more positive spin that we're reviving things. Also, what right now is a title called Open Space / Cultural / Historical. And I'm wondering if that should be retermed something like community assets. And your comment about being all inclusive, I think that's an attitude as much as it is a work item. And we don't have that attitude. And that goes to ADA and what you just mentioned. The lawsuit potential and things we've already had are costing us money. And making ADA then makes things more all inclusive. So I don't know if we want to change it to something like community assets or something that's more all encompassing. And I hear what you're saying about the homeless and mental health, but to me, those are big problems that we're having as a city, and it's impacting our residents every day. How many of us are getting emails constantly about what's going on? I agree with you about what's frozen positions and what positions we need to reevaluate. City manager has already proposed, for instance, instead of deputy city manager, reclassifying or redefining that position, also HR. So I don't know how that falls in our priorities, if that falls under fiscal stability. But it would be what maybe worded something like review or not review.
I called it government efficiency, for lack of a better.
There you go. Got it. Okay, that sounds good. So bottom line, inclusive is the attitude.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, I can speak.
Sorry, there you go. I looked once, you didn't have your hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion, actually, and I should have asked this earlier, but just a clarifying question. Could staff elaborate on future COVID planning, since I wasn't here for that discussion, and if that's still applicable?
I think it is applicable, probably much less degree than last year as we come out of this. But I think we've now developed such great planning through this last year in a consolidated form that we'll look at going back and revising that if we have relapses of how that looks at. But I think very little additional work would have to go into that compared to what we've done this past year.
I mentioned that there's 125,000 in the budget for that.
Great. I appreciate the clarification. I may suggest, given that context, taking it off this priority list, not that there wouldn't continue to be some work, but maybe if we're concerned about adding on too much, that may be one that is no longer a priority to the same extent that it would have been a year ago. But appreciate the discussion. Especially on the suggestion of homelessness. I think I pretty much agree with most of the, if not all, the comments that have been made around regional approach, working with the county, working with community partners, and just want to be clear that when I suggest that it's not that think that we could or should do anything unilaterally or create some new department or try to do something on our own or reinvent the wheel. But I do think it'll take some leadership and prioritization to pull all the different pieces together and really address this in a way that puts the needs of the community first. So that's where I'm coming from on that. And I'm also in this discussion, talking through these, also just try to think through of as I said at the beginning, where we are now versus a year ago and what problems have risen to new levels because of the pandemic. So that's where I'm coming from with that. Also very much appreciate and support Councilman Landry's comments around inclusivity and mental health, other areas that have really been highlighted by the pandemic. We got into that a little bit with, for example, the Vice Mayor's comments around parks and open space and how that really became an important piece of mental health. And I've seen it come out in other discussions that we have. So I would love to put pen to paper on that and start thinking around that. I would, Councilmember Bybee mentioned the housing element update. I would think that would be an important one to add under comprehensive long-term land use and planning. So that's my comments there.
Thank you. You reminded me of something. Under the open space, I like the idea of community assets suggested by Councilwoman Landry, but that's another example of a work plan where during the budget discussions, there was a conversation about maintenance of restrooms and trash cans and things. And I think council was overwhelmingly in support of not decreasing maintenance and not having trash cans overflow. We felt very strongly that maintenance and the parks during the week and the weekends was very, very important. So I would expect there would be a work plan item that supported that for all the reasons that various council members have offered. Okay. So how about we ask staff to chime in here and see what staff would think about for these priorities and how they would fit into a work plan, what they've heard from council. We really want to have a dialogue here.
Sorry, I was taking a note here, so I was catching up. Yeah, so I think as we've talked throughout the year, staff's been taking notes on future work plans, and we haven't proposed specific work plans to you, but all of the things that were mentioned, I think, are for the most part, maybe some exceptions, things that we've talked about. Especially with the implementation of the housing element, looking at what we do with the general timing of the general plan, the economic development model, social media, and our PIO role, how we support that on the city level, how we're dealing with staffing. I don't think there's an assumption that everything's going to just resume full bore. We did that in the budget just to show you status quo. I think that we've heard loud and clear it needs to be a more strategic approach to how we staff in an efficient way to really hit the mark. And if that's changing positions or consolidating, we'll look at that as well. And then I've heard things, housing and homelessness. Those have been hot topics this year. We'll look at areas of where we could suggest at least appropriate. If there's our work to be done in those areas, we can suggest some work plans in that too. And then I've taken notes clearly on other comments today that we'll look at to see if we can incorporate that and add in those additional work plans that were mentioned today. Governance and redistricting, I think, is one of those that we would have naturally recommended. We'll include that as well. And I may be missing some others, but I've taken notes on individual comments as well. So we'll be sure to address those as we develop the work plans.
Is there anything that from community development, park and rec, public works, anything that we were missing? I know we're going to have a new city clerk. They may have some things that they want to have done. So we're a little bit open on that one until later. But anything from the department heads?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Paul.
Yeah, the three important ones for community development would be the general plan, housing element, and objective standards. I think the Bay Area 2050, I think we've already resolved that in your attachment 1A. But those are the three that really are very important.
Thank you. Director Capurso?
Yes, thank you. I do appreciate all of the discussion on particularly on things like Measure O and open space and playgrounds and even park restrooms. So thank you for that. And not to mention, helping maintain our maintenance staffing levels. I do have to say that, this is it's going to be a challenge, I think, for all of us, because I think on the one hand, we're very ambitious and we want to be sensitive to our community's needs and maintain our facilities and make them ADA compliant. But then the other side of that coin, I'm hearing that we need to, we need to maybe reduce our resources and our position levels. So we're, even within these adopted priorities, I think we're going to have to be mindful that some may need to take precedence over others, maybe certain periods of the year, or maybe in the first year of a 5-year plan, certain things need to be prioritized. Because I think we are going to be challenged to be able to provide all of the things that I've heard the various council members talk about in terms of service levels and improvements, and yet keep up with Measure O and keep up with playground development. So I think that will probably be an ongoing discussion. And as we put together our proposed operating budget, I'm sure some of those questions will continue to have to be discussed. I just think there's going to be challenges there with us being able to do everything that I've heard discussed this morning, and be very mindful of the resource constraints.
Thank you. And Acting Director, Community Recreation and Community Development, Natasha Bissell.
Good morning. So, for recreation, just as we reopen our doors and bring programs back, it's always through that lens of being as cost recovery as possible for us and doing the programs and services that are meaningful to our community for their general health and wellness and how they feel connected to our community, and doing them as best as possible within the confines. And as Director Frentis said, that by fiscal 23, we're anticipating a more relatively normal department and programs and services. It doesn't mean it's going to look exactly the way it was before. We're looking at different models to provide maybe similar services, or changing the way we've done it to make it more cost effective for the city in doing those things. So, that's going to be our biggest priority as we start to reopen, and just managing all the restrictions with COVID, with people wanting to participate and do things in the community again, and having them understand what those restrictions currently are.
Thank you. And certainly last but not least, Chief Byrd.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think the discussion today was very helpful. I think a few of those priorities obviously have fallen in our lap over the last year, especially the conversation about homelessness. And I know I've had conversations with many of you about what a difficult position that puts the police department in, but nonetheless, we're being very proactive about it and finding those resources and putting making the connections with some of these groups. So we will continue doing that, and we will continue working on identifying areas that the city can better support issues like homelessness. One of our priorities as we move into this next year and as things start opening up is the connection with our community has always been a priority for us, and that's really been lacking over this last year. So we're looking forward to getting back to some sense of normalcy and getting that community engagement. We have some new programs that I'm hoping we'll be able to implement so that we can build those partnerships even more and have a better understanding of the work that our officers do on a daily basis. So I'm hoping to present that later this year. And kind of going along with that community engagement, and to the city manager's statement about communications, I do think that is a priority for not only the police department but for the city. And we are in a very difficult budget time right now. I understand that, and as we make these difficult decisions as it relates to the budget, I do feel very strongly about having an appropriate level of resources for the city on day-to-day operations, but also in times of crisis like we've seen over this last year, and we really don't have the appropriate level of staffing in that regard. So we continue to work with what we have, but I do think that as a city, we should definitely look at how we can address some of those shortfalls, for lack of a better term. So I look forward to everything that comes in the upcoming fiscal year. I feel very, very positive about where the city is, and on behalf of the police department, I know all of our staff are excited about the work that we're doing and excited to get back to normal.
Thank you. And CISO for IT, I'm assuming the city manager is covering you. Is there anything you need to add?
No, we continue to work on various projects, particularly the automating what we're doing now, Zoom, and moving back into the council chambers. That's the most recent project. We just deployed both new phone systems, and we're beginning or continuing to integrate that with our cloud-based applications. Really trying to facilitate all the changes through COVID-19. As the departments are changing, we are there to support their changes. And a lot of those changes, as you very much are aware, are technology-based. And so we have quite a bit of activity through the last 12 months or so with COVID. But we're also continuing with our projects. In many ways, technology has accelerated, which is a great thing for IT. Particularly in the acceptance of technology and the use of technology. So we've seen those applications and those investments that we made that you approved a couple of years ago in Office 365 be heavily used because of COVID. And I think after COVID has dialed back a little bit, I think we're going to continue to see that as well. So we're in good shape. I'm very excited about the future.
Thank you. I'm glad somebody in technology is excited about technology. Okay, I'm going to give anyone.
I think Finance Director had just a few comments. As well.
Where are you? Where are you? I don't see you. There you go. You got to raise your hand.
I'm here. So I also did have a couple of things to say also about our own department. I've heard today that both a fiscal stability and fiscal recovery are two things that are really important to a council. I think there are things that are important to Campbell in the whole, and then our department. I mean, we really touch everything and every department because we help to ensure that we're able to pay for and we're able to fund everything that we do. And so we've got a quite capable department, but also at the same time, we're also a small department. There's only 8.8 FTEs. And although I don't propose that we increase our costs in the current year, the one thing that we really need is people who are able to really go through a data, who are able to go through the new things from either the state or the state or the Congress, who are able to go through different trends. So although I'm not proposing that we do it in the the current year. I think that we need to think about a year or two down the road about either additional people, also getting additional help through different contracts, so that we are able to ensure good fiscal stability, good fiscal recovery. Because if you don't, then it basically then goes to either me, it goes to just a couple of people in the department, and for me, I think you're in a much better spot if I'm in the big picture stuff. I mean, I'm certainly capable to go through a data, but I see that to be the one thing in our department that we could really pull up. So just something for the council to keep in mind. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have to have more conversations on that.
Yes. Thank you very much, Council.
Okay, so 15 minutes left. I'm going to begin by summarizing the priorities and any comments I have on the items, and asking each of you to do the same. So under priorities, I heard agreement about keeping the overall grouping here, and then changing the name from financial recovery to financial revival. I'm okay with that if others are. Changing open space to community assets. I actually think that's a good change for a couple of reasons. I would take out the general plan update and substitute the housing element, because that is what is in front of us. I agree that 2050 is somewhat behind us, but not until the end of this year. Legislation and objective standards are all important. Under Measure O, I would add that we do have some staffing changes that I understand we have to be prepared for. So I want to make sure there's a work item or something about that with Measure O, make sure we know what we're doing in there. Under fiscal stability, I would support adding a government efficiency that we've spoken to. That would include communications, because that is really important. And let's see, under financial revival, I'm okay taking out COVID planning, but I would offer that COVID still isn't gone. So we can't lose sight of the fact that it's still out there. Offer also an opportunity in a work plan item. Other cities like Saratoga and Los Gatos have offered that there might be some opportunities to share work, such as review, excuse me, such as review of ADU plans and solar heating systems and electric hot water heaters. We might be able to find some cross-pollination between cities. And under community asset, I don't think I said that. I would, instead of putting playgrounds and parks, I would maybe leave parks, but playgrounds and trails, I would put recreation and parks as an item as a whole, because as was just explained by Acting Director Bissell, that there's a lot happening in the way of community assets. The Park and Rec Department, or Recreation and Park Department, is really a community-oriented function of our city, and it's been a long-standing commitment of our city. And looking at it as a community asset with our open space, I think is the right way to do. Okay, quickly, in terms of the 7-year forecast, I would prefer to see more conservative revenue forecasts. But mostly my biggest concern is I do not think we should budget the full ARP money. I really think we need to take advantage of this opportunity to realize we need to trim our sails in terms of our expenses. And I would support no more than 50% of the ARP being in this current budget. I'm in support of not raising businesses licenses. I am in support of raising fees in general up to the 1.17 CIP. On the CPI rather, on the CIP projects, we haven't talked about them specifically. I am not supportive of showing the Bearcat, as was mentioned in the public comment, in this fiscal year. I realize it's not going to be purchased, but I do not think we should show that money being set aside in this fiscal year. Commission plans, council can get input from staff on how those can be best managed. And I think we've done a good job giving budget assumptions and basis of work plans. And that's it. Okay, who wants to go next? Councilwoman Landry?
I agree with what you summarized. The only thing under community asset, I'd add a category: accessibility and inclusiveness.
I have a hard time understanding what that would actually physically in a work plan item be. I agree with your comment about it being an attitude. Can you help explain how that would become a work plan item?
Well, for instance, if Campbell Park playground improvements is on there, what level of inclusivity has it included in the design? And the accessibility obviously goes to the handicap ramp and other ADA improvements that we need.
Okay.
You asked for comments, so.
No, I'm trying to think how to phrase it for staff as a work plan item.
Accessibility and inclusiveness, inclusivity.
Incorporated into all projects. Maybe something like that. Okay, what else? How about the 7-year forecast?
I agreed with the comments that you made.
Okay.
I would add the traffic calming was not listed as out the years.
So staff will come back with that modification along with a lot of the others. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Bybee or Councilmember Lopez?
I'll go ahead. As far as the priorities, I don't, I believe that the general plan update should be a priority. I think that needs to be completed. I'm not in support of changing the titles. I think that those are tied to the strategic plan, and that's why they're there, and that's why they're named that. I think that we, as far as the work plans, it's a matter of managing expectations. We have reduced staff, we have reduced budget, limited resources. We've thrown out a lot of ideas, and I really think that staff needs to come back with priorities based on what they heard today to say, this is what we can do. Or if you want this as a priority, this is going to have to go. I really think that we need to have that discussion. I don't think that we should be necessarily changing this document, this strategic priority today. I think that should be done at our priority session or work plan session. I'm sorry, work plan session. As far as the 7-year forecast, I support using the ARP money with, again, keeping expenditures at a status quo, not increasing those to any great extent in fiscal year 2022. I support no increase to the business license fees, support the minimum CPI increase for user fees. And I'm okay with the CIP projects at this point, and look forward to further discussion at the CIP study session.
Thank you.
Does that cover everything?
Sorry?
Does that cover everything?
I think so. Commission plans? The commission?
Again, I think staff needs to look at those and come back with some recommendation as to what's doable, what's not doable. And maybe an afterthought after listening to the discussion about homeless, maybe that could be a function of one of our commissions, CIC. Maybe they could be an ad hoc committee that kind of orchestrates an effort in the city. That might
Interesting.
be a good work plan.
Interesting. Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. I'm less focused on changing the titles or categories as much, but it is important to me to make sure we have the capacity. And I just want to clarify. I appreciate all the ideas, and I think it's been a valuable discussion around homelessness. A lot of these are things that I already hear that staff at the police department is doing, on homelessness specifically. Chief Berg alluded to briefly. So I think a lot of this work is happening, but I do think that some guidance and leadership from the council would be valuable to help consolidate some of those efforts around the good work that's already been going on. Love the creative ideas around potentially having commission or having some of the commissions work on that. Would love to continue that discussion at a later date. And just overall, this is skipping ahead a little bit to the commission plans, but do want to make sure that we're, we have some really great people serving in that capacity. Want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can, especially with limited staff capacity. And I know that just in informal discussions with commissioners that they're hungry to do more work, and I think we'll step up if we work with them. But again, want to make sure, as others have said, that they align with council priorities if we're going to go forward. I also, I think I would be fine also with moving Bay Area 2050, and as I've said, future COVID planning. I want to stress future off of the priorities list. And I'm by no means, I know these are still ongoing, that there's still going to be work there, but I'm not sure they rise to the same level of work and staff time required as some of these other ones. So that's all I'm coming from there, just an effort to streamline a little bit. Not that the we need to let our guard down on some of these. Supportive of the comments around inclusivity and the discussion there. And also I agree with Councilmember Bybee that on the general plan, I think the community is looking for us to leadership on this process and to complete that and follow through on our obligation to do so. So I really think that's an important one to keep on as well, and continue building off the work that's been done. The 7-year fiscal forecast, I'm fine with that at this point, although we all know that the further out that you project, the more fuzzy that some of these numbers get. But definitely appreciate the work that staff has done and that's gone into making sure these are aligned, the research, and even more conservative in some cases than others are forecasting. I'm more flexible on the ARP funds. I do think that we need to make strategic decisions about the budget going forward and make some of those structural changes that we all see as important. But I do believe we need to minimize the impacts to the community, and that that's the purpose of some of those funds. So I have some more flexibility there. Don't support raising business license fees. I'm supporting raising other fees in line with CPI. But if there's one where you can make the case that waiving that would really have a big impact on the community, I'd be open to that discussion. But I don't support holding those, not increasing that across the board. The CIP plan, fine with at this point, but I think the discussion today and some of those clarifications will be really helpful as we flesh that out a little bit more. And commission plans I already touched on, but I want to make sure that they're aligned with our own priorities. But do want to work more and make use of the commissions.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Resnikoff, to wrap it up.
Yep, thank you. I'll try to be quick because I know there's a hard stop for some. Yeah, I'm supportive of the priorities as is. I don't think we need to wordsmith them. I'm okay with them as they are. One thing I want to comment on, I think we touched on, is when all this comes back, I would like to see full costs for the programs. The greatest example of that, and this is no decision on it, was Natasha talking about the pool. She can recover her operational costs, but Todd holds, or Public Works holds, the repairs and the maintenance. We need that together in all the projects that have costs. So we know, are we recovering full cost? And if so, I have no problems with those programs. If we're not, we have a conscious decision to make. Do we want to fund those at a deficit? So we can't do that unless we know the costs at the city level. So Brian, that's on you to combine what I'll call the cross department costs. And we don't have that in the past. I think we need that. I'm fine with keeping the business fees as they are. Frankly, if it makes sense to offer some waivers or some incentive to get people to register, because later on, that's good info for us to go back to them for research. That's good to go back to them for full fees in the following years. So if we get some benefit out of doing that and it helps the businesses, I'm good with that. I'm okay with raising other fees, in particular, the ones tied to staff costs. Staff costs go up. We should be recovering those fees. But I think Councilmember Lopez made a good point. The sections are okay. There may be some that are very minimal to our revenue or are very critical in the impact on the person paying the fees. And if there are those cases, I'm okay with exceptions where we say we're going to waive those for a year. But in general, if costs are going up, we need to recover those. I'm okay using the ARP money, keeping in mind, I think Councilmember Vibey said, we need to still freeze positions and we still need to be keeping expenses reining in expenses and all that. So as part of that, we shouldn't just be using it to say, well, let's rehire, rehire here and there. Do that on a basis as we need to, but keeping in mind we're still cutting expenses and freezing positions. I'm in favor of using it. The commission plans, I think it was said, staff needs to come in with some recommendations and the cost impacts and the impacts on staff time in doing that. I'm worried about staff having time to implement those, and then we can decide what makes sense there. And lastly, the CIP, I'm fine with that as it is now. I don't think we should be making decisions now to remove from the CIP. I'll reference, because it was referenced earlier, the Bearcat. I view that the same way I'm going to view the other CIPs. It's incumbent on staff, in this case, the chief, to come in and say, why do we need this? What's the use policy and can we afford it? And on any of those CIP things, if they can meet those criteria, I'll be supportive. If they can't meet the criteria, I won't be. And maybe, and it might be that we need it and there's a policy, we can't afford it now. We'll work that out during the CIP meeting. But I'm not in favor of removing anything right now. I'll keep it as is. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Not too bad, 12:02. So I would just offer one thought, which is by using all of the ARP money, staff is projecting a surplus. And that doesn't seem to me to provide an incentive for staff to take a hard look at the overall organization and how we as a city can move forward. And the next year has a projected $2 million shortfall. And we are building up reserves in the meantime. So I just worry that we're dumping it all in one easy solution and pushing the problem down the line. Hopefully not. So Mr. City Manager, do you have everything you need?
I do, and I just want to add to that, we hear loud and clear from the council the need to fix those structural issues that exist so we don't get to 2023 and have a deficit. So although I'm hearing a consensus of the council to program those ARP monies in the general fund next year, we will be taking a hard look. And that is our goal, is that the structural changes that we make this fiscal year set us on a path of success in the out years so we don't have those deficits. And that would be our goal. So with that being said, I think we've got enough input from the council today. I appreciate everyone's time and comments, and we will be back to you with a great deal more of information at the next discussion.
Well, thank you to all the staff for spending all the time and effort to put this together and attentive to the discussion from the council. I hope it was helpful and constructive for you to hear our thoughts. And we look forward to working to a good budget. So thank you for all the hard work, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Hey, Council. Thank you.